Hey, this is Jill Simonello with Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, and today we're here with something that's really interesting. This is the 2022 Mazda MX-30, and this is the first all-electric vehicle that Mazda has brought to the United States. So in this review, we're going to talk about some of the nuts and bolts and some of the details. We're not going to go too far into the weeds, but I do want to give some of the practical matters. But I really want to delve into what I like and the one thing that I don't like about this vehicle, and you probably won't either. So let's take a closer look right now. Now, before we check out the rest of the vehicle, I'm going to start right here because this is one of the quirky things about the MX-30, and that is going to be how the doors operate. Yes, this vehicle is built on the same platform that the CX-30 is built on, but it does things just a little bit differently. And let's look at the doors. So the front door opens normally. You'd get in and out the way that you would normally get in, but these second doors, yeah, it opens out like this instead of out like that. So if you are familiar with the Mazda RX-8, you've seen this on a Mazda vehicle before where they had these so-called suicide doors, but this is a different way of handling it on an SUV. I think it works really well, it looks pretty good. The only problem is you're not going to be able to open this door unless the driver opens his door first. So there's no way to open this back door once the front door is closed. So a little bit quirky, a little bit interesting, but I also want to point out that Mazda doesn't intend for this SUV to be a family vehicle. It is one of those vehicles that somebody who's single is going to own, a couple without kids is going to own, and you're going to have occasional passengers back here. But could also be a young family because there are rear seat latches back here too. And frankly, actually with the way these doors open, putting a car seat back here would be a lot easier than having to fight your way through a B-pillar. But this is one of the quirks, and let's take a quick look at the exterior now before we move inside. As we circle the exterior of the Mazda MX-30, you will notice there is a distinct family resemblance here. The headlights are really close to what you would see on a gasoline model, but that grille is going to be different because you don't need all of that space for the air to go in. As you circle around the side, yeah, you still have the cladding, but you've got this extra piece right here, this two-tone color for the roof, which makes it look a little bit different. You've got this accent here that calls attention to the fact that this is special. And then as you circle around to the back, again, the taillights are going to look familiar, but they're a little bit more artistically done. They bump out a little bit more. And if you were trying to tell if this is a gasoline or electric vehicle, really, I think the only way you're going to tell, other than the fact that you don't have any tailpipes, is this eSky Active badging. Now, the interior for me is really where the MX-30 is going to show its difference, because there's a lot going on here that doesn't look like a gasoline model. So first off, this interior is new and unique to the MX-30. This is the dark interior. There is also a light one, but this one is the dark interior. It's called Industrial Vintage. So you have this dark chocolate leatherette surface as well as cloth material for the seating surfaces. And then when you move inside, you're going to notice this digital cluster as well as, you know, the large infotainment screen here, which before you even ask, no, it still is controlled by this touch controller here. So they did not give you a touch screen. That is not different. But what is going to be different is you do have a touch screen for your HVAC controls. And what's interesting about that, and we specifically asked, why would you give us a touch screen here but not here? And that is because the passenger is probably going to want to control this at some point to add the heated seat, control the venting, maybe make it a little bit cooler. And so having accessibility to the screen is going to be very important to the passenger, but this right here is also really big and easy to see and easy to adjust at a glance while you're driving. The other thing I'm going to point out is you have redundant controls. So you can change the temperature here with these hard buttons, or you can do this here, you know, with a tap or a press. And you've got the same thing going on over here for your vent speed. So you can do a tap or a press, or you've got the button here that you can adjust. So redundant controls, touchscreen there. I actually think it looks really nice. I've given other vehicles a hard time for dual touchscreens, but the way that they've separated this, I think it works. I think it looks good, and I think they've done a good job with it. Overall, I really like how the interior looks. I think they've got some really nice accent pieces, and the stitching is well done. The interior placement is well thought out, and I also really am totally digging these cork accents. So you've got cork on this little, underneath the floating console there. You've got the cork right here, and you actually have cork kind of behind that door handle as well. And so, fun fact, I have to tell you, if you didn't know, Mazda was actually a cork making factory once upon a time, back in the 1920s. That's how Mazda started. They were not an automaker, they were a cork maker. So this is kind of a little bit of a throwback to the Mazda heritage, and frankly, sustainable, and it looks cool. While we are in this area, I'm going to point out this clever little feature here. So it hides cup holders. You can flip them up or down, and if you flip them up, you have the added benefit then of blocking off what is in your center console. So this will pop up. You can move it back, and then you can pop it up, and it will show what's in there. But it's really cool because if you don't want people to know what you have in there, so okay, yeah, you can see in there from the front windshield, but all you have to do is flip these back, and that's hidden. So I don't know, clever, cool, I like it. In terms of other things that I like on this vehicle, so since I'm sitting in park, I'm going to just hit that button there, and it will show you the around view camera. And it has the dynamic guidelines, so as you move your steering wheel, the guides will change to tell you what you are approaching and give you a better idea of how close you are to the rear, the back, another car, the guidelines. When you pop it into reverse, it will show you the reverse view. When you pop it into drive, it goes to this, but if you press that button over on the left side of the steering wheel, you get your front view. I will say I wish that would have a little bit of a delay and stay on, but we take what we can get. In terms of other things that I like on the MX-30, I'm going to point out this gauge cluster back here. So you have the digital display in the center, and it's mildly adjustable. You can hit the button there, and it scrolls through some other things. So yeah, my battery is low right now. I'm in a parking lot. I'm close to a charging station. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, so you can configure it a little bit, but not a lot. You've got your analog gauge over to the left that shows when you are doing regenerative braking and charging, and then or you're in power mode. But here's what I really like. So I've said this before, but Mazda is targeting a first-time EV buyer, and this right here I think is totally key. So knowing that you have 20% battery life, I don't know, for me, what does that mean? All right, yeah, you could say it's 21 miles of range, whatever that means. But this, to me, is something familiar and I understand. It looks like a fuel gauge. Obviously, it's your battery gauge, but it looks like a fuel gauge. And to me, that says, okay, I'm at a quote-unquote quarter of a tank. I should probably go fuel up. So I think that's a nice little visual cue there for somebody who may not be used to an EV. And I don't know, it's one of those things that just makes sense. Now, another thing I really like on the Mazda MX-30 is going to be the driving position. So you have a lot of adjustability for this seat in terms of slides. So it can go back pretty far to accommodate somebody who is on the taller side of things. I feel like I'm sitting in the back seat here, but it moves forward to a really good position for somebody who is on the petite side of things. And obviously, I can appreciate that one, but you get to the position where you are far forward, and I've got it pumped all the way up, though I will point out you can also push it down. But in my 5-foot tall driving position, you're in the far forward, far height adjusted point, and then you have this tilt and telescoping steering wheel. Now, obviously for me, I do not want the steering wheel here, but because there is such a great amount of slide to go back, that accommodates the taller drivers really well. I have to say, that seems like that's about like, what, maybe a 6-inch slide? I think that is really well done. So kudos to Mazda for making this a really adjustable position for taller and smaller drivers. I also want to point out there is a height adjustment for the seat belt, and I like that because it comes down lower on my shoulder without coming across my neck. So I think Mazda's done a really good job there to accommodate, again, your taller and smaller drivers and how long or short your torso is. This vehicle is the top tier trim, so there's also lumbar support. I like that too. Now, as I already mentioned, this right here is going to be more for your occasional passenger. And I'm going to point out this seat right here is currently adjusted for my driving position, and oodles and noodles of legroom going on. But if you draw the seat back, and weirdly Mazda has positions on the back of the seat that I can do that, so I can show you what's going on. So if you pull it back, this is the far back position. I still have a couple of inches of legroom. Now, where I'm going to run into problems is if somebody decides that they have to go down. Then I'm going to get pinned. I'm going to get pinned in here if somebody wants to lean it back really far or tilt it back. But for the most part, this is as far back as it goes, and I still have about 3 or 4 inches of leg room going on. So, I mean, you're not going to accommodate a 6-foot tall passenger behind a 6-foot tall passenger. That is not going to happen, at least not terribly comfortably. But you could get an average sized adult back here for a little bit of time, and they're not going to be wildly uncomfortable. Plus, with this door opening the way it is, you're not going to have this awkward crunch or, you know, get out. I mean, it's just going to be more of a easy slide to get out of the vehicle rather than, yeah, the awkward position. The other thing that I want to say about these back seats that I like is they're pretty comfortable. So you can adjust the headrest, and when you put it in the position that it's meant to be in, so you flip it up, it doesn't push your head forward. The seats themselves have a good amount of padding on the thighs and glute area. There's a nice lumbar support, and overall it's generally pretty comfortable. So as long as you can accommodate for the legroom and you don't have a super tall person behind a super tall person, this is actually a pretty decent usable back seat in terms of comfort and legroom. Now, before I move on to the driving experience and driving impressions, as well as the one thing that I do not like on the MX-30, I'm going to talk about the last thing that I love about this Mazda and, well, frankly, all Mazdas. Mazda does a really good job of attending to the details. So everything from the stitching on the armrest to this attractively placed cork to the details on the console to the ridges on the control dial and the volume knob to even just that nice chromy accent piece on the dash. Everything is a detail that is really well attended to, and the details carry through into the back seat as well as the exterior of the vehicle. So from the lines that you see here to the details in the grille to the accent pieces and even the shape of the taillights. Mazda is a master of the details, and I love that. All right, I wanted to pull off and actually hook up a camera because I want to talk a little bit about the driving experience of the Mazda MX-30. And I do mean experience. So all of this going on is designed for somebody who is a first-time EV buyer. So you're not targeting somebody here who is a long-time EV owner is looking for the next step. This is Mazda's attempt to start bringing people into the EV fold. And they've done a lot of things that make this an easy vehicle for somebody who is a traditional gasoline engined owner, to bring them into that fold and to make this a more usable vehicle. So I'm on a little bit of a twisty bit of road, and I'm not gonna be turning around to look at the camera, but I kind of want to talk about what I'm doing and what's happening to the vehicle while I'm doing it. So bear with me and enjoy the experience. So the first thing I want to point out is that Mazda has levels of brake regeneration, and when you put the vehicle in park, you put adaptive cruise control or cruise control on. When you turn the vehicle off and then turn it back on, it recycles and it sets it kind of at a mid-level. So you take your foot off the brake and you kind of coast to a stop. And it gives you a little bit of regenerative braking, but nothing really super aggressive. If you use the plus paddle on the right side of the steering wheel and you press it, it gives you more of a coasty feeling. So somebody who is used to driving an automatic transmission, maybe that's where they would like to start. However, when you hit the minus paddle on the left side of the steering wheel, you can kind of add more regeneration into the braking pattern. And so you immediately feel like a little bit of pull. So I just took my foot off the brake and the vehicle slows down. Now, do not mistake this for one pedal braking. This is not a one pedal driving system. Instead, what it is just a more aggressive regenerative braking. It'll bring you mostly to a stop, but I found that when you get to about 3 miles per hour, you kind of switch into coast mode, and that's where the vehicle kind of wants you to take control and start using the braking function. But I think that's pretty well done on Mazda's part because it's a much more natural feel. So somebody who's used to driving a manual transmission, for example, is going to be somebody who likes the engine braking. And okay, this is an electric car, it doesn't have any engine in here, but you get more of the engine braking feel that you would get, say, if you were driving a manual transmission, and I like how they've done that. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but another thing that Mazda has done is they have piped in sound to the MX-30, and it's not an engine sound. They didn't want it to sound like an engine, but they didn't want it to sound like the Jetsons, something going for takeoff. And so you just have a little bit of sound that basically tells you when you are slowing down, like that, or when you are speeding up. And the idea behind that is they really wanted people to understand how the vehicle is performing, behaving with speed. So in a lot of EVs, there's just silence and you lose track of your speed. So here, with the it gives you an immediate tell about, okay, I'm speeding up here, or I'm slowing down. So I think that's good. It's a good tell for somebody who's used to driving a gasoline engine vehicle, and I certainly also appreciate that. Now, another thing I want to talk about here is going to be this gauge display, because they've made it more traditional and less like, hey, by the way, I'm driving an EV. And you do have a central digital display. It has your speed limit on there. And they have done an interesting thing that there's a sign reader that tells you what your speed limit is. And as your speed limit changes, there's a little red mark on the speedometer that also changes, just to give you a visual cue about what your speed limit is and whether you're staying with it or going over it. And I find that more helpful than the red blinking lights or the flashing speed signs that tell you you're going over the speed limit. That's a physical marker and a really good visual indicator. It is now time to move away from the driving experience and talk a little bit about the driving impressions. And to be brief, I want to say initial impressions are really good. They've done a great job of taking this electric vehicle and tuning it to be very similar to their gasoline-powered vehicles. It has that zippy zoominess that you get from their turbocharged vehicles, and it does really well on twisty bits, cornering, but it also does fairly well in a straight line as well. Now, the one thing that they didn't do is they did not tune this to be like all of the other EVs out there. So you're not going to get that instantaneous gush of power, that insane mode, head flipping back into the seat kind of acceleration. Nope. Instead, it is just more natural, seamless, and a lot more like you would experience in a gasoline-powered vehicle. Mazda did that on purpose because their intent for this vehicle is that this is going to be something that someone who is a new EV buyer would buy. So they're not targeting your die-hard, steadfast EV buyers. They're targeting somebody who's just trying to start transitioning into the EV world. So from the acceleration to the handling to even the gauge cluster, the things you're going to see on this vehicle really have a similarity to their gasoline powered vehicles. So it makes that transition just a little bit easier. I want to touch on the one pedal driving-ish situation again. So if you, as I mentioned in the experience part of this video, if you tamp down on the left paddle and you increase the regenerative braking, as you take your foot off of the accelerator pedal, the vehicle slows down. And if you're planning ahead, if you're paying attention, it'll slow down a lot, and it'll slow down almost to a stop. But I'm getting yellow light here. I'm going to slow down a little bit faster, a little bit harder. I need my brake pedal for that. So you get the one pedal driving experience-ish, but it just isn't going to take you all the way down to a stop. And again, for a first-time EV buyer, that's pretty cool. Plus, I like the fact that if somebody doesn't want all of that regenerative braking, they can tune it so that it operates a lot more like a regular automatic transmission vehicle, and that you're coasting rather than slowing down when you take off your foot from the accelerator pedal. Starting to get a little bit rambly here, so I don't want to prattle on too much longer. Just want to say I think Mazda's done a really good job with the overall ride and handling design of this vehicle, but there's one thing that is going to be a little bit of a turnoff, and that is going to be the range. It is only 100 miles. We've said it before, so I'm going to say it again. It's 100 miles. And when I started this drive, I was at about 36 miles, this portion of the drive, I was at about 36 miles of range. And I'll tell you, I've got a sign on here that says high voltage battery is low, and I'm starting to feel a little bit of the anxiety. I want to get back to home base so that I don't have to worry about running out of charge. And that's going to be a problem. So this is not for the faint of heart. It's definitely for somebody who is going to have the ability to charge at home, and it is also going to be for somebody who may be able to charge in the middle of the day. Certainly not for somebody who has a 50-mile commute out and a 50-mile commute back, unless you have a steadfast way of charging once you get to your location. But for an urban driver like me, in most cases, all I'm going to do is 5 miles to the gym and 5 miles back. This is going to be one of those perfect vehicles in the EV world. If I had to sum this up really quickly, I'm going to say I like it, but I wish there was a little bit more range. Stay tuned for more news on that later. All right, that's it. That's all I got. I figured I'd close out this review with a shot of the cargo area because this is pretty decent for a compact CUV. Be sure to follow us on the web at pickuptrucktalk.com because I will have a written review there and I'll have more information. So until next time, I'll see you down the road.